All right, welcome back for another episode of What is This Clarinet? And today we have an interesting clarinet, a vintage one or actually an antique one that was from Brussels, Belgium, from a maker called EJ Albert. And this, of course, had Albert keywork on it. And I've never really did my research into the origination of Albert keywork, and this kind of forced me to look into it. Let's take a quick look. Unfortunately, the person who sent me this picture only sent me one picture. I asked for more but never got it, so we'll just go ahead with the one picture. So what we can see here is, of course, we have a star on top and bottom. That's common back in the earlier days. Some other companies still used it, like Malern still used them, and a whole variety of other clarinet makers used star emblem. And we see here EJ Albert. A means from, and this is basically Brussels. I don't know how to speak Belgium, so it's Brussels. And that was very interesting. EJ Albert. And I was like, is Albert related to the origination of the Albert keywork clarinet? Let's take a quick look at Wikipedia. Now, something I never knew about Albert clarinets was the person Eugene Albert actually was the one that started the Albert clarinets, other than just his name on the clarinet. He lived from 1816 to 1890, as you see here, is a Belgian woodwind instrument maker, primarily known for his clarinets, based in Brussels, Belgium. Now, I did a quick search on him online and I came across piccolos and flutes also. It says in here, started working around 1839, and his sons, you may recognize some of these names: Jean Baptiste, 1845-1999, Jacques, 1849-1918, and E.J. Albert. They don't give the age of E.J. Albert right here. And Eugene Albert continued to make clarinets until the end of World War One. It says here the model clarinet he still made is widely known as the Albert system. And that's how I've always known it as the Albert system. Never really identified it as coming from a person named Albert, but there it is. I also did research into the Bohm keywork, but not really Bohm himself, just through the Buffet company information. And you see those videos that I have, just search for Bohm and Buffet, you'll see history. Now it goes on and says, although this model is basically the same as Iwan Mueller's 13 key instrument, with the addition of some improvements inspired by his tutor. Now get this one, Adolphe Sax. Sax was the first to use ring keys on the clarinet. That I also did not know. And I did have some videos about Adolphe Sax, and I have a couple more videos coming up about him, and one's about bass clarinets, and the other is about other general woodwinds. Anyways, going on, we have in 1840, he made an improvement to the Iwan Mueller's 13th key clarinet, adding 2 rings to the lower joint. This resulted in the 13 keys 2-ring clarinet. And that same year, Albert, based on the Mueller modifications of Adolphe Sax's rings, created a new keywork system, adding 2 more rings to the upper joint. So if you've ever been through Albert clarinets, and I think I have a couple around here. If we take a look at early Albert clarinets, this is a more of a later one. This upper joint, you can see, has no ring keys. No ring keys on the upper joint. And we're talking about adding ring keys to the lower joint. 2 ring keys basically looks like this. Yeah, 1, 2, 2 ring keys. And you'll notice the pad cup is right here, and there's an open tonal up here for your finger. Well, another weird thing is, look at see a 3-screw finger rest. So that's adding the 2 ring keys on the lower joint. Oh, and one thing to look at, see these spoon keyworks? These keys right here look like spoons, basically like oboes. You'll see modifications later on like this. Actually has flat keys on it with rollers. What if you got the idea from Adolphe Sax about that, right? Basically, adding the 2 more rings to the upper joint after adding 2 rings to the lower joint results in the 13 keys four-ring clarinet. His instruments are now reported to have better tone intonation than the Bohm models of that time. And his clarinets were apparently very well made, finely tuned, and very popular in England, where, to do some more name dropping here, the leading clarinist of the time was Henry Lazarus, who owned 8 of Albert's instruments. So that's another name. And when Bose and Hawkes, now, or I should say Bose and Company, now Bose and Hawkes, decided to begin making clarinets, Albert was brought to London as consultant. Stuff you never knew. Now here's something else interesting. Eugene Albert's instruments were almost all made for high pitch 450, 452, meaning after World War I, few professionals actually played them. But his son EJ Albert made a range of clarinets in A440, which basically means that people used them after his death. Doesn't say when that was. And his instruments were played up until the end of the 20th century. And you can still find them on eBay too. It says here it's probably EJ Albert, not Eugene, who built an early alto clarinet in F. Now I looked at eBay. Let's take a look at some eBay pictures real quickly. Now this is going to be some interesting pictures. We have the same thing here, EJ Albert Brussels. Nothing really different about it. What I want to show here is if you just take a quick look at the clarinet, you'll see it's a Bohm style clarinet, not an Albert style clarinet. This one was off of eBay and was EJ Albert. So at some point he himself abandoned the Albert keywork and went to a Bohm keywork because that was really the standard of that day. And there's a lot of things here you can take a look at. Of course, it has the shared throat keywork here, has an adjuster for throat keywork. The hammered C sharp, G sharp key looks, buffet like. There's a lot of things here. He took his ideas off of, well, all the clarinets at that time really kind of looked the same. See, really thin trill key guide. Really the Bohm key work in the clarinet at that time was really defined in the late 1800s, and people just kind of duplicate it at that point forward. So here's another clarinet from EJ Albert. You'll notice this has a wraparound register key. This is a little bit different now. Now take a look. You'll see the throat keys that are both straight. The side G sharp key goes straight forward. It doesn't cross over like this one here. So this key comes up and crosses over the A throat key. This one doesn't have an adjuster on it. So you had to set things really properly there or add fork or something there to create interference. Oh, and look at the little trill key guides. Of course, this only has 3, not the 4 we're used to. And you see the same thing here. That only has 3 side trill keys. Take a look again. See the 3 keys? See how that is? And if you take a look there, you see that there's a top tone hole just below the throat key, open for your finger, then 2 more ring tone holes. And then there's a pad cup between the 2 rings. And this clarinet does have rollers on it, if you notice. I mentioned the rollers on this body piece I had. And the lower joint has just like this. See 2 ring keys. 1, 2. You got a sliver key, which really isn't much of a sliver. It's kind of big. And then a pad cup up there. Then if you notice the same as on there, your bell keys on one side. There's a stiffener right here to help it. Then these 2 over here are long mechanisms. This one here is only 1 long key. This other one here is a long key, but there's a hinge right here with a pin that closes the key. right here. So that's from the website collections.ed.ac.uk. Now, the Clarinet Direct website had an old clarinet on here, a pair of EJ Albert Barrett Action simple system clarinets. We kind of zoom into it. And we can see just like the other pictures, the throat keys are straight. There's no crossover there. Has rollers, and just like the other picture. The information they have on here was that it says the Barrett Action was much favored in Britain, largely due to the strong endorsement of George Clinton, professor at Kneller Hall, Royal Military School of Music, in the early years of the 20th century. Continued to be right up to the 1950s in Great Britain. Jazz players continue to use them. And this says the EJ Albert was the leading maker of simple system clarinets in Europe. So that's a very quick review of an EJ Albert clarinet and where the Albert keyword came from. Came from Eugene Albert. And then his son EJ Albert continued on for a bit with the Albert clarinet. Of course, you know EJ Albert, just from looking at eBay for a few pictures, also created Bohm system clarinets. So just a little bit of history there about the Albert clarinets and the maker, origination of the Albert clarinets, and how those names, even Adolph Sax, had some inspiration for him for an improved key work for his clarinet. Anyways, hope you like that. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you later.